Thanks so much for joining this session. My name is Nadav Shemtov. I lead Gainsight's Enterprise Customer Success team. And this is Jennifer.
Hello.
We are very excited to be talking to you about a very interesting and exciting topic today. We'll try to keep it upbeat and hopefully keep you all interested. If you can, we'll later have an exercise. So once we move to this point, I would like people to group around in tables. But for now, I think we're good. Let's get started. Just keep in mind, as was introduced this morning, we have Slido on for this session. So if you all go in your phones or tablets to slido.com and choose Success Unplugged, that's the name of this room, you'd be able to submit questions during this presentation, and we will then try to address them at the end of the session after the exercise. So definitely, as we speak, if there's things that come to mind, questions or comments, please leverage Slido. So to get us started, let's just talk about what we are hoping to cover in the next 40 minutes or so. So first of all, we want to provide an overview of how to think about ROI of customer success. Of course, ROI means return on investment, and I think this is a topic and a question that probably many of you as customer success professionals have to deal with in your day-to-day. What is really the value that your team brings to our organization? How to prove the ROI of your team to other functions within your organizations and to executives more broadly. After just framing this, we would want to share a specific framework of how we at Gainsight think about tracking the ROI of customer success. And then finally, we'll have a hands-on exercise. We're trying to make this as actionable as possible, and the idea as part of the Success Unplugged session is to have you in groups kind of have a chance to brainstorm and take some of the ideas we presented and then share it back with the team. So that's really our plans and goals for the session. Hopefully at the end of it, we can go back and say that we checked off each of these. So starting with a question which hopefully resonates with many of you, why is it so hard to define the ROI of customer success? I think it's a topic that we at Gainsight and at the customer success industry have been thinking about for a long time. In my role in Gainsight, I've worked with some of our large enterprise clients over the years, and I would say while maybe 2 years ago we hoped this is a hot topic and something that's going to go away because we all just figure it out, in my opinion, that's not the case. I see many customer success teams that have to prove this value day in and day out, have to really fight to prove their value, and are not all of them are doing it successfully. I can probably think to several companies that, you know, when customer success teams are not successful in proving the value of their teams, companies decide to not invest, to stop investing in customer success, organizations that decide to move away from their investment, etc. So I think this is at the end of the day a really important and a difficult topic to cover. And what we are trying to do today is to provide you all with a framework. I know Dan in the keynote today kind of talked at a high level about the ROI of customer success, but we hope to double click on some of the topics he mentioned. Thinking about why is it so difficult, I think we can talk about two key problems that make it really challenging to really make this ROI point. So problem number one is the fact that customer success teams have broad accountability, but really limited influence in some cases. So what I mean by that is, when you think about what are the typical metrics that customer success teams are seen as accountable for, very often it's gross renewal rate. I would say that's the most common one. Sometimes it's some sort of an upsell quota or expansion quota, but it's really in most of the cases just one of these two. Now, if we think about influence, yes, of course, customer success teams, if we do our job right, if we help our clients get to their outcomes they're looking for, and we make sure that they have the great experience, we obviously control and influence the renewal rate and upsell, but as you probably all know, that's not the full picture. It takes really a village to make sure customers get the outcomes they're looking for in the experience, and what we can do as a customer success team is important and it's valuable, but we can't do it alone. So, you know, if the product doesn't deliver, or if salespeople or our sales counterparts do not negotiate the renewals correctly, we might missed renewals or missed upsells, things that are really out of our influence zone. So when thinking about this problem, that makes it difficult at the end of the day to define the ROI. Now, on the flip side, there is almost the opposite problem of broad influence and limited accountability. So the way I think about it is customer success managers in their day job, they influence much more than just the renewal rates and the upsell, right? So if you think about it, you can claim, hey, if we do our jobs right as customer success managers, we make our customers successful, then these customers turn into advocates, and it helps marketing qualified leads, it helps our close rate. If we provide the right feedback to our product teams, we, at the end of the day, can lead to better product quality. We can really influence much more than what we are accountable for. So it's this idea that the true ROI of customer success is not fully captured by just these metrics and measures that customer success teams have been traditionally accountable for. And therefore, there is this, if you think about this Venn diagram, really there isn't a lot of overlap between what customer success teams are accountable for and what they can influence. And there is these two issues here, which are really the flip side of the same coin. So what is the solution to this issue? Or what is one solution? Let's put it that way. Really developing a consistent framework to track the outcomes that your customer success team is delivering and the ROI of these solutions. When you think about what's an effective ROI of customer success framework, there's three key things that it has to do. Number one, it has to align this accountability and influence to really these two circles that were pretty far in that diagram I just showed. How do we make them overlap as much as possible by creating an ROI framework that's, it's more comprehensive? Two, how do we make this ROI measurable and quantifiable? And yes, there are dollar signs in here in the slide, because at the end of the day, we all know that, when decisions are being made, if we can't show cold dollar ROI, we won't fare very well when these decisions are made. And finally, we have to be able to easily track and communicate this ROI that we capture internally and externally. So, I've used the word framework like 3 times, so this is just a little comic relief talking about, it's a model for developing a process to create a framework, or maybe it's a process for creating a framework to make a model. But we'll try to make that framework as actionable for you. And in the next slide, we have some specific examples of what a good framework could look like. And that's actually a framework that we are using internally at Gainsight to prove the ROI of our team. I'm guessing our job might be a little easier given we work for Gainsight, so thankfully our CEO gets the value of customer success. But that being said, we still need to show and quantify that value as much as possible. So I don't think this was covered, a similar concept was covered in the morning, but I wanted to kind of take a step back and share how we think about customer-driven growth. I think Dan mentioned, the evolution between the different models, so some of this is not new to you. If traditionally we're in the sales funnel that I think all of you are probably familiar with at this time, where, it's leads converting to opportunities, converting into $1 customers, and then the end of that funnel is very narrow, and whatever happened after we got a new customer was seen as just the end of that funnel, supporting and maintaining a customer. I think all of us have realized that this model is outdated, and I think over the last 5 years or so, that land and expand model of the hourglass has become very prominent. And that's the idea that, yes, the funnel gets narrower, but then you can adopt land and expand per the TSA language and really expand that funnel. What I'm saying today is that we think we're actually past that model as well. And what we have called the Helix model of customer-driven growth is really kind of flipping that and looking at something that really spirals upwards and thinking about your customers, your existing customers, as being your key revenue growth engine for your company. And there is really an exponential upward spiral growth engine that's more than just landing and expanding. And we'll explain what we mean by that. If you think about, a process that starts with a lead, Obviously, marketing can bring leads, pass them to sales that become opportunities. Sales work very hard, convert this opportunity, and we get a new customer. And that's where really our job starts, where we are responsible for making this new customer into a successful customer. And if we do that correctly, and that's really what the essence of our job is, we can really untap a whole new revenue growth engine that can really be exponential and lead to much more revenue for our company and much more success for our company. So think about this. Every successful customer that we create really generates 3 new leads for us. So by making one customer successful, we have generated 3 new leads. One, and the first and the easy one, and not easy, but the one that maybe we're more used to thinking about, is a lead for renewal. By making this customer successful, by helping them get the outcomes that they're looking for from our customer, from our product or platform, we have made the renewal much easier. The renewal should become a non-event, and they'll stay with us for much longer. But by making the customer successful, we do much more than just renewal. So, we can create leads for expansion. And by that, what I mean is expansion within that same client. So whether it is cross-selling another offering, or it's upselling more of the same product to the same users within this client, or uncovering more use cases, business units, teams within this clients that could benefit from our product solution or offering. So by making the customer successful, it's going to become that much easier to make this case for expansion. And very often, in fact, I've seen it in my own eyes, the customers that we've helped make successful serve as these internal advocates and help us find these leads for expansion even when we're not looking for them. Finally, it's this idea that every successful customer can turn into a lead, or actually much more than just one lead, for new logos. So that's the advocacy point that I think we mentioned this morning. It's the idea that by making a successful customer, they'll be that much more likely to go and advocate for us, talk to their friends, word of mouth, participate in advocacy activities, and help us really as a company land new deals. So when you think about it this way, that's that helix that I referred to earlier. It's the idea of every successful customer turns into at least 3 new leads, which then continue the cycle and leads to more new customers that turn into more new leads, and there is this great virtuous cycle that we can create just by making our customers successful. Of course, on the flip side, if we don't make them successful, we have that much more to lose. And that's why we really think that thinking about these 3 different types of leads, how do we track them? How do we make sure these leads are attributable to us and that people within the company understand that we've helped generate these leads? And how do we put a dollar figure on these leads to prove our value and ROI is really the topic of what we want to talk about.
It's also a great thing, Nadav, internally. So we all have our customers internally at our different companies. So you probably work with sales. One way to increase that ROI just for customer success too is when you're handing over these leads or your advocacy events and you're tying them in, whether it's marketing or sales, that goes a really long way too for partnership internally.
For sure. Awesome. So I just want to make sure everyone notices this color coding because it's going to repeat throughout the presentation in order to make it a little easier to follow. What we're going to do is really kind of double click on each of these leads, what they look like and how we recommend tracking them, and how we do that in Gainsight. And again, just a reminder, if you have questions, thoughts, please post them in Slido and we'll try to get to them at the end. So really thinking about these 3 leads is basically another way of saying we as a customer success team, or basically as any company, has 3 growth levers in this Helix model. So the one is retain, that's these leads for renewal. The second is expand, the leads for expansion. And the third is new logos through advocacy. So these are one and the same. Another way to look at it is just in a more visual way. So think about this. We have a starting portfolio as a company or as a customer success organization. I want to just visualize how these leads, where do they get us, right? So that first retention piece, growth lever, is, of course, preventing churn. That's one side of it. And on the other side, driving renewal. Again, very similar, and we'll talk about the type of activities you can do for each. But at the end of the day, these 2 effects, of course, cancel themselves and lead to some additional dollars retained from that starting portfolio. On top of it, we can add the upsells or cross-sales or expansion that we've enabled as a customer success team. And by the way, this model assumes that the customer success team is not directly accountable or responsible for closing these upsells opportunities, although I know that there are many customer success teams that are. But even if you're not, it should be seen as your job as a customer success organization to enable this upsell, to track these leads, to flag them, and to pass them to whatever team it is, account executives, customer account managers, whatever you call it within your organizations, to really execute on that upsell and to help grow that account. And finally, you can think about all the new business that we have accelerated by making our customers advocates on our behalf. And that's the piece that I would say people tend to overlook most often. So people are more used to thinking about the new dollars that come from renewals, the existing dollars retained from renewals, the new dollars that come from expansion. But I haven't seen many teams that effectively go back to their sales team or to their CEO or to the CRO and say, hey, look at all these new dollars that we have generated because we've made our customers successful. Of course, some teams try to make the case that, every expansion dollar or any advocacy dollar at the end of the day should be attributable to us, because without us, our customers would not be successful and our company would not be successful. While I've heard that case many times, I think having a way to quantify directly what percentage of that revenue or what part of that revenue was directly affected by the customer success team tends to be a more successful strategy than going to a CEO or a CFO and say, hey, when you think about the ROI of our team, just assume that any expansion dollar is done because we've done our job.
Yeah, and it's not just, I know it's some of the really large enterprises, it's not just expansion dollars too, it's professional services, it's upsell and cross-sell around any of those other areas besides, licenses and what we traditionally think that we're renewing for or expanding on.
For sure. So taking all of this together, that will get us to our ending portfolio, which is hopefully much larger and more significant than our starting portfolio. And an easy way to think about the ROI of customer success, if we're able to quantify each of these buckets in dollars and then compare the ending portfolio to the starting portfolio, that's really the dollars, the incremental dollars that we've driven as a team. Mm-hmm. And putting that number and getting to that number is not an easy task, but at least having the framework to think about it and start working towards it can be very meaningful. So looking at, another way of looking at it is a framework that, we do with each of our clients internally, and that's something that we have seen as very valuable. So I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you. It's similar, but it's just a slightly nuanced look to it. So when you think about it, these three outcomes that we mentioned are the retention dollars, expansion dollars, and new logo dollars. We think about these as lagging outcomes, right? These are, at the end of the day, the financial metrics that a customer success team would be accountable for. We at Gainsight, as Gainsight, of course, we look to enable our customers to get these outcomes by leveraging our solution. So that's a framework we use when we work with our customers to say, hey, why did you get Gainsight? What are you looking to achieve? Are these three goals as important to you? Are there ones that you want to focus on first, etc.? But thinking about these are obviously lagging outcomes. The definition of a lagging outcome is that it takes time before we can see that financial metric. It's easy to define, it's easy to measure, but what's not easy is knowing, are we driving towards this outcome? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we pushing the needle in the right direction? Which is why, while aligning on these three outcomes and trying to quantify them as outcomes that your customer success team gets to or would eventually help your company get to, it's not enough, which is why we say, hey, we need to think about leading indicators. So what are these indicators that can serve as a sign on whether we as a customer success team are doing the right things, and are we driving towards these lagging outcomes? The idea, some of you I'm sure are familiar with the idea of leading versus lagging indicators, but just to make clear for those of you who may not be, the idea is this needs to be more short-term. We're able to track them, maybe not just at the end of the year when we look at the renewal rate or the retention dollar, but we can track them more often, and we can more easily attribute changes in these leading indicators to our team. So I'll cover what each of these are for us and our perspective on what is a good leading indicators for each one of these three growth levers or outcomes. So starting from the top, retention dollar, right? That's the obvious one. We think about health scores, and specifically how we define health scores within Gainsight as the best leading indicator for that lagging outcome, which means we want to make sure we build a good enough health score so there is correlation between are they green, yellow, or red, or whatever scale that you choose to use, and whether they ended up staying with us for longer term. So thinking about this health score that, at least for SaaS companies, is very often heavily focused on adoption targets. That's where the adoption gets here. But maybe for other on-prem or other business models, might be constituted from other factors. So looking at this health score and saying, hey, by looking at how many customers we've moved from red to yellow or yellow to green throughout the quarter or maybe every month, how much more renewal dollars have we ended up affecting in the long term? The next one on the expansion side is a term that I know some people in the industry have already started using. I've worked with a few clients that have rolled out this CSQL process, but maybe is newer term for some of you, so I'll take a minute to explain it. A CSQL is basically a customer success qualified lead. So thinking about those of you who are familiar with the traditional sales funnel, just like there's marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads, this is a customer success qualified lead. And the idea here is, how do we standardize on an approach to say, I as a CSM am creating a qualified lead that says there is an expansion opportunity within this account, either through upsell or cross-sell or whatever it might mean based on your business model. And how do I pass that lead to, very often, the sales team to really action? It's similar to how a marketing team passes leads to a sales teams. Once you have a process to operationalize and track these CSQLs, it becomes much easier down the road to say, here's how the CSQLs that we created as a team really led to expansion dollars, and it becomes a much more compelling argument than that pocket statement that I made earlier about all new dollars or all new expansion dollars should be attributable to the CSM team. Finally, similar concept called CSQAs, so Customer Success Qualified Advocacy. Thinks about that as for each company that this might mean different things. For us in Gainsight, that would mean customers of ours who are willing to advocate on our behalf by speaking at Pulse today, or writing a case study with us, or posting an online review, or any other type of advocacy event. We call it and we track it as a CSQA internally. And then what we try to do in our BizOps team is, of course, or CSOps team is very helpful there, is finding ways to operationalize and track which of these CSQAs led to these new logo dollars. So we can take some of that new logo dollars and say, hey, these were directly affected by the CSQAs that our team has generated, and therefore, without us, without the good job that we do, these new logo dollars just wouldn't have happened, or maybe they would have taken much longer to happen. So yeah, these are these definitions. Just so you know, we internally track each of these. These are part of the metrics that our CSMs get. Some of these are tracked at an individual level and some at the team level. But we have a very strong perspective that we want to make sure that our CSMs track towards each of these leading indicators and then do analysis of how are these leading indicators really correlated with the final outcomes, which is, at the end of the day, the bottom line of what we care about. Another level is just thinking about operational metrics. So that's taking the same concept, but taking it one level more removed from the outcome. So again, as you move to the left of the slide, and I know it's a bit weird that it builds from right to left. Maybe it's because I speak Hebrew and that's how I used to reading the world. But as you move from the right to the left, these operational metrics are obviously, if I would go to a board or a CFO and say, oh, look at how many risk CTAs were closed, that's not as meaningful. They probably would tell me, what are you talking about and why should I care about this? As you move towards leading indicators and outcomes, it becomes an easier message to communicate. But as you move on the other direction, it gets much more easier to track and operationalize, because a risk CTA, and by the way, for those of you who are not familiar or not current Gainsight customers, these are just calls to actions that we track within our system that are meant to, at the end of the day, indicate that there is some sort of a risk. And in the ideal state, you would want to believe that there is some sort of correlation between risk CTAs that are closed and increased health. So these are more operational metrics, and these are just examples. There's obviously many more operational metrics that can help you understand how your team is doing with each of these buckets. I'm going to expedite a little bit because I can see we probably have just 5 more minutes and I have a bunch more slides, and I want to make sure we get time for the exercise.
Or keep going.
So what we have here is just a couple of slides, and obviously these would be available for you. So there is quite a lot of detail on these slides. Double-clicking on each of these and explaining, giving some more guidance into how to track and operationalize and think about these things. So if we think about that retained dollars, that first bucket here, the retention dollars, thinking about establishing some sort of correlation, as I mentioned, between how the activities that we do as a customer success team to drive customer health and their likelihood to renew. So of course, if we track customer health correctly and we have the right health score, by definition, a green customer should be that much more likely to renew than a red customer. And we should think about how this likelihood to renew really correlates with our customer lifetime value. And that's an easy way to quantify the work that we do. So to take this example, as mentioned earlier, a customer success team minimizes churn by doing things like escalations, quarterbacking, et cetera, and also drive retention, which is just a flip side of the same thing, by driving adoption, change management, helping customer realize their strategic goals. If you think about that impact, basically that delta in the renewal probability between your red customer and your green customer, that's really the impact that you will have on your customer lifetime value. So finding a way to create this correlation through data over time, and then say, take that delta in renewal probability and multiply it by whatever you have found out to be the average customer lifetime value, could give you like a clear dollar figure that at the end of the quarter or the year, you can go back and say, we've moved these many customers from red to green, and that's the dollar effect that we expect to have. So basically multiplying these two things, so saying a 20% increase in retention probability between red to green would lead to X dollars. We're not going to do the math right now, but thinking about the expansion piece, which is that second bucket, that orange bucket that's highlighted, as we talked about, we generate leads and opportunities. So this is just a new business funnel that any of you who've come from marketing or sales or are right now in marketing and sales are probably very familiar with. We have contacts that become marketing qualified lead, that turn into opportunities, that turn into won deals. How do we create that same type of funnel in the customer expansion funnel? So thinking about the starting point is not all contacts, but it's all of our existing customers. How do we generate these CSQLs, customer success qualified leads, for upsell and cross-sell as a CSM? Then we pass them on, most likely, to someone else to turn them into opportunities, and at the end of the day, turn them into dollars won for our company. And thinking about some metrics throughout that cycle that we can capture. So how many CSQLs we have generated a quarter, the dollars of CSQLs or of opportunity that were created based on these CSQLs. And it sounds complicated, but it's very easy to create a workflow in Gainsight and Salesforce, for example, or any other CRM, to have a field on the opportunity to correlate it to the CSQL or attribute it to the CSM, which at the end brings us the $1 that, again, this is that $1 that's directly affected by CSQLs. And finally, the new logo dollars. Just one framework and way to think about it. What we see on the screen here is a very common buying cycle, of awareness, research, evaluation, and commitment. So that's a traditional buyer's buying cycle. How a new customer is looking to or interested in your platform is the stages they go through. And the green boxes on this slide is just some touch points across each of these stages where CS or customer success can really impact that buyer journey. So example is if I'm just in the awareness stage, if I go in here and a customer speaking about a solution at an event, I can become aware of it. Or by customers posting about our solution, I can become aware, or by word of mouth. Similarly, online reviews, if your customers go and to websites such as TrustRadius, for example, and post reviews about your solution, these become critical for customers in the research cycle. Same with case studies. etc. ROI quotes and backdoor references and then formal references, which are still very much a part of any sales cycle today. So again, similar to what we talked about before, thinking about what metrics and how can you quantify the effect that customer success has in each of these stages. So NPS, which I think mostly everyone is familiar with, Net Promoter Score, is a common operational metric, I would say, to think about advocacy. And obviously NPS can help. If your customer is willing to advocate for you, they can do it in any stage of a prospect's buying cycle. But there is other pieces in the cycle where different types of advocacy activities become more important. So for example, in the research stage, that's where you can just count how many case studies, how many blog posts, et cetera, your customers have generated. We have targets, again, for our own team to drive advocacy events from our clients. And then, of course, tie the dollars on opportunities that were directly affected by a customer, either because they referred a customer or because they provided an official reference during the cycle. We connected them through that cycle. These are all things that we do. Very often our companies do, either as CSMs or customer marketing or sales. All it takes is finding an easy way to track them, through a field, through a system. Gainsight definitely helps with that. And then through aggregating and reporting, we can really get these buckets of dollars of repeat purchases, dollars of referral deals, et cetera. So what do we do next? We've presented this framework. I think, as Dan said in the morning, we want to give you all food for thought and things that hopefully some of you can go and do Monday morning or Thursday morning, and then other things that you can do in 6 months from now. But at the end of the day, every customer success team or leader should have their own framework. We would hope that that framework we presented today can be a good starting point and a good place to start, but at the end of the day, every business is different. There might be some nuances. So building your own framework based on that, making sure you're clear on what the lagging outcomes, leading indicators, and operational metrics that your own customer success team drives towards is really the key first step. Then taking that framework and aligning on it with your company's leadership to make sure that the leadership team is bought into the value of customer success. I think it makes it much easier when you come with a framework and say, here is all the dollar figures we expect to affect. Here's the leading indicators that would help us know whether we do it or not. And I come to you to just validate and align on it. Then taking that framework and defining your own team's metrics and goals based on these is a very necessary piece. Of course, if we don't provide the right incentives and we don't provide the right metrics and goals to track individuals in our team, we can come up with very beautiful frameworks, but they'll never be operationalized and no one would care about them or do anything about them. So that's just a piece that's really important. Track these metrics over time and really conduct ROI analysis to start establishing these correlations. This is something we've started doing with our customers more often now to see, hey, are these leading indicators? Is closing these risk CTAs, as we talked about, is it correlated with increased health and eventually retention? And how can we quantify these through ROI analysis? We do it through our value consulting practice, but I mean, you can take the same approach and do it internally. And finally, define the value of your team to other functions in your organization. So while your leadership team, your CEO, your CRO might be aligned, it's always good to create alliances and get other functions within your organizations to buy in to that value you can bring to them, present that value to them and validate it. And that's a segue to the exercise that we have probably just about 7 minutes to
Yeah, we can
conduct.
just explain it and have them talk amongst themselves
Yeah.
a little bit. But to that last point that Nadav was talking about, where how do you socialize the ROI of customer success internally, even at our largest enterprise customers who have bought in and are heavily investing, you can still talk to certain groups and say, what is customer success? Or, what does this do for me? You just took half of my, sales dollars away or something like that. So we actually have a pretty easy exercise here where we're going to go through what value you provide to other functions. And this is the beginning of how you look at ROI from internally to externally. And each one can be a little bit different. So you'll notice that in front of you, I believe was passed around some sheets, and it's for you to take, but it's a way of looking across your organization and what value you bring to those organizations. And it's something just like when one of the things that we do when we bring on a new customer in the onboarding is review what they value and what their return on investment is going to be, and then we report back quarterly. This is the exact same exercise that you would do with your internal stakeholders as well. So the first one, we don't quite have 10 minutes, but just within the people at your table, just take a look at these and talk and flesh this out with others in terms of sales, services, marketing, product finance. There's a few others on there as well. What value do you bring to those groups? And that's the beginning of a framework for you then to take internally to see what they value and then be able to find some quantitative metrics around that so that in a quarter from now you can report back to them.
Great.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, we have about 9 minutes for this session, so maybe we won't do much of a readout, but I think it's still, and Jennifer and I can walk around between the tables, but maybe just get started, get a discussion, start thinking about what are the qualitative things we can do for other functions, and then how do we drive to more quantitative measures? What's really the dollars we can tell a sales team or a services team we bring to them? That should hopefully be a good starting point for a discussion. And Jennifer and I are more than happy to talk about any of these things one-on-one or two-on-one or two-on-two or whatever it is over the next few days.
We can share some of our experience too. In fact, today I was at a lunch and we were talking about health scores, and our life is totally comprised of health scores and what are our customers doing, and I'm talking about it all the time. And he said, yeah, I tried to take that to our sales team and that had no relevancy. They're like, it doesn't matter. So, think about the different groups and where you can provide that value. So, yeah, let's go cruise around.
Awesome. So exercise time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.